Great. Wonderful having all of you today. Thank you very much for joining in from the different places of the world you're joining from. We're very, very excited today. We'll be entering the world of Malawi, Uganda, Zambia, very fine, different worlds we may not have been introduced to earlier. So keep on your curious minds and curious hearts and curious eyes. Would be lovely to hear today from Unia, Alessandro, and Harold. But before we do that, my name is Ajay Pinjani. I'm joining from the Global Schools Forum. It's my pleasure to be part of the community of practice, along with Chiara, who's also joined us in helping us planning. And many of the other colleagues have also helped us plan this community of practice over some time from the last year. We've already had 3 sessions. I'll give a bit of a cursory look. But before I do that, please, with your names, if you want to rename them and share the organization you're joining from, that's always easier to connect. If you want to put out in the chat where you're joining from, what's the time, how are you feeling, just anything, it is always lovely to know more than your names written on the chat here and there. So yes, and we would love to see your faces as well if you can switch on the videos at any point in time at your ease and convenience. A bit about Global Schools Forum. We are an organization who supports non-state education organizations across low middle income countries, across 70 plus countries now, with 180 strong, 180, now 190, I believe, members that we grow, I think, every month now, it seems. So it's pretty fascinating. It's really amazing. Our 4 pillars are community, which is all of you at the center, at the foundation. We love to chat with you, converse with you, understand where you are, understand how we can connect you with other community members, and then built on the knowledge, the funding pathways, the partnership pathways, which you can really find more about on the website as well, or connect with me or Chiara or anyone else at the GSF team at any point in time. We'll be really happy to walk you through around our org structure and our goals and thought processes, our learnings overall. Today, we look forward to beginning with just our learnings from the past 3 sessions, introduce, peace, and link education, reflect on some questions together if we get the time, and then explore the next gathering as well. But before we do that, we encourage and appreciate undivided attention. I think that always creates magic, and we are really grateful for your presence. So thank you for joining us today. I don't know if you read the blog recently published at LinkedIn and GSF website as well. I'll share the link in the chat as soon as I'm off the screen. And please do so. It was an opportunity for us to reflect on the World Climate Day on Monday this week and share learnings of where we are together. I'll share a snippet of where we feel we are together from what we've learned from the previous sessions. But please do go ahead and read the blog and share it widely as well, so that we can bring in more members in the community of practice, hopefully funders, policy advocates, and others, so that we can really be clear and loud and hear them as well and have a collective journey together. What have we learned together? There's much more than this slide, but We're learning that climate change cannot be addressed in isolation. It is not only an education challenge or a gender challenge or a health problem or a livelihood challenge. And again, we'll see today in the presentation as well, but it is all at once. And I think that's what makes it much more profound, something very complex as well, but yet something very, very visible and very profound for us to join our hands together. We've learned from organizations like Earth Warriors, Climate Class Action, and others. Agency matters much more than awareness, while awareness is the key and nothing goes forward beyond that. And we'll hear that from Peace again today on building resilience with agency, with students and teachers much more. So I'll pause there for now. Local knowledge is an under-tapped resource. I think that we've been hearing from the very, very beginning, that there's a lot of indigenous knowledge which we all hold, which we all come from our own context. And sometimes I think the dominant narrative just ignores that completely. And if we really want to understand climate, sometimes it would be good to go back to that, to go back to the wisdom of our foremothers, forefathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, and many more, to really connect with that. There is will, certainly there is will, but there are structural constraints. I think structural constraints are both at the school level, the teacher level, the student level, the organization level, the how the schools are organized also today. We may not have a curriculum or a period to figure out, or do we really need a period? Do we really need a period alone for climate while it is so overarching? So what do we really need? I think that's the question we've been asking ourselves. And are we ready to dissect the structure a bit, or dent it a bit, so that the goals are met rather than we are bonded in the structure which we have created ourselves? And then the spillover impact is really real. What happens, an example came was from Earth Warrior section. It was in one of the Delhi schools in India, was that the children were taught about not using plastics, and then it went to the families, and it also went to a level where some bakeries had to close down because they were selling plastics and children refused to buy it. So the impact can be really big and real, but it's really unmeasured. We don't really know right now, or we haven't really built that muscle of measuring it together. So we are hoping that we'll continue searching for these answers and building more questions, because I think asking the right questions is a very beginning of finding the answers as well. So thank you for collectively joining our journey so far. I'm really, really honored to have Alessandro, who's the Education and Impact Associate, joining us from the UK. Has had an interesting experience in South America on indigenous communities and seeing that relationship of indigenous communities and their wealth with the environment as well. So it'll be lovely to hear from you, Alessandro, today on Peace. Unia is just a fabulous person. I've had the luxury and leisure of working with her in Uganda, and she's like a mother there. If you go there, you'll feel that motherhood there, and not a mother only to a few children, but to the schools, and thereby, rightly so, she's the head of school network in Uganda, and thereby, and there's also a Zambia network of peace as well. So we'll hear about that. Harold is the executive director in Malawi. We'll hear about Malawi as well. I recall when I spoke to Harold, he shared that Link Education's initial modus operandi or initial focus was not the climate, but when the COVID hit and the climate crisis hit, I think without climate, they were unable to even proceed with any other activities they wanted to. So climate became very profound. And I think that really connects with our learning as well. So without further ado, we'll start with Peace, hand it over to Link Lerol. We have a reflective question as well, but we would love to learn from you as well. So at any point in time, if you have questions, thoughts, put down in the chat or even ask, and let it be a dialogue rather than a monologue for anyone. So thank you once again for joining us today. Handing it over to Alessandro and Unia.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Ajay, for that. Let me just share my presentation. Make sure everyone can see that. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up? Everyone can see that? Perfect. Give me 1 second. So yeah, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you guys all today and talk a little bit about PISA's approach to climate education. So we today will share our approach on how we integrate climate education into our whole school framework. across secondary schools in Uganda and Zambia. So at Peas, we think that climate education should intersect with many facets of school life, not just from curriculum and teacher training, but also to operations and student leadership and building those skills, as Ajay mentioned. So we're going to share some learnings about how we prepare our students for a climate conscious future and hopefully offer some practical insights for other organizations that can take forward in their own school networks or when they work with school networks. So I'm just going to hand over to Unia, who's going to take us a little bit through who we are as an organization and kind of the climate context within which we operate. So over to you, Unia. Let me just...
Thank you, Ale. Thanks, Ajay, for the wonderful introduction. I'm Unia from Peas. At Peas, we expand accessible education, quality education across Sub-Saharan Africa by running schools and improving the wide education systems. So we have presence in Uganda, Zambia, and Ghana. But in Uganda, to be specific, we have a network of 30 secondary schools. When we add from our sisters in Zambia, it is a network of 46 secondary and primary schools across Uganda, Zambia, and serving over 26,000 students annually. So we are scaling our practices by partnering with 490 government schools across Uganda, Zambia, and Ghana. And this is through our system strengthening project, where we carry the good practices from the Peace network of schools and then roll it out, scale it out to the government schools in an effort to strengthen, improve education systems in Uganda and Africa. Just to take you through the reality of the climate sagas in Uganda and Zambia, and it's typical that Peace builds and runs schools in rural areas. In these three countries, Uganda, Zambia, and Ghana, as already highlighted, we find that all our activities are the front line of the global climate crisis. Being in a rural setting, our schools being in a rural setting means most of the communities that we serve are farmers, either peasant farmers, mainly peasant farmers, but also from the farming activities that they do, that is where they derive incomes to support the children in the schools. So one of the crises that hit Zambia in 2024 was the worst drought in the 40 years, which triggered a power outage, because with the hydroelectric power, you must have sufficient water to run the turbines. But with the drought, most of the water sources were nearing to drying out, and so there was a shortage of power because of the climatic change. Then we had the whole multitude of our students depending on the boreholes, and that much stress on the boreholes definitely leads to frequent breakdowns. Then other climate change characteristics like extreme rains, heavy rains can lead to flooding, and therefore have outcomes of other related diseases like cholera, dysentery, diarrhea, and all that. In Uganda in particular, the extreme rains also come with challenges. As you've seen in the opening picture, one of our schools sits at the foot of those hills. And so when it rains heavily, it really does a lot of havoc to our schools. You find there are lots of landslides, and so roads are damaged, lots of gullies there. Sometimes they are flooded, and so the children find it hard to cross to schools. They have to stay home for some days until the roads are really dry and passable. Sometimes the heavy rains and landslides will wash away the bridges that connect the communities to the schools, and so and therefore causing high rates of absenteeism in the school, lots of study disruptions, and also the farming livelihoods of the families are greatly affected because much of their crops are washed down, or if you are the lowlands, then the mudslides will come and cover up all that you have. So you'll find communities are being shifted from one place to another, and without a constant and permanent settlement, livelihoods are really challenged. Children are migrating all the time from one school to another, and this causes a bit of stress and pressure on the children, which sometimes causes them to drop out of school because they have so many days of school that are missed, and catching up with the lost learning becomes a big challenge. So climate has always been a part of our context, but conditions are getting measurably worse. And that is why, as peace, we are calling for everyone's effort in this agenda, the climate change agenda. So, as earlier mentioned in the previous slide, I'll stress a bit on some of the ways in which climate change is impacting education, especially in the peace context. So these conditions create direct and measurable barriers to education for peace students. As I said, sometimes accessing the schools becomes a problem and the children have to stay home for a number of days. In the worst scenarios, when it is a dry season and a long drought, it means the children have to walk quite some distances to look for water. What that means is that still some will stay away from school because they have to get up early morning, go to pick water for the siblings at home. Some of them will try to get the water home and reach school, but they reach school late and already carrying a lot of fatigue and stress. So learning does not really take place as may be desired. So there are increased rates of absenteeism, but also later leads to total dropout of students from the schools. Our schools being set up in the rural areas means 100% of our parents are farmers and therefore depend on the natural climate. So when the climate is not good, it means even the harvests from the farms, from the gardens, are not going to be good. So in a way, it directly affects the livelihoods back at home. It means if I'm a coffee farmer and I hope to sell my coffee and get school fees, the yields are going to be low, very low, and so I'll find it a problem to send the child to school because I will not have the fees to pay for either the studies, for examination, for uniform, all those scholastic materials that are needed, I'll not afford. So that is when eventually children are kept at home without going to school, and some of them get into early marriages, especially for girls. They are given away by their parents into early marriages for them to gain something out of giving away, say, their daughters for marriage at such an early age. But also others will end up into child labor. Both the girls and the boys can end up into child labor because of those conditions. So once the rains are heavy, or the heavy rains may wash away even the electric poles, there are power disruptions, which means the students are not able to get extra reading time. The moment it's dark, and they have to wait till the next morning to depend on the sunlight. But also, as I said, it's really affecting the livelihoods. It's driving financial stresses back at home and also in the schools, because even the schools will find the food that they're supposed to buy really expensive because the harvests have been that poor because of the climate conditions. Notably is that much of this really affects the girl child. As I said, in most of the times when there are low incomes in a family, the first priority for education is given to the boys, and the girl will stay home to look after the siblings. They also have stresses that they face during their menstrual cycles when there is no adequate water at home or even in the schools. So they are forced to stay at home for fear of getting ashamed before their friends when they stain their clothes and all that sort of things. So it affects a cycle, as it affects the schools, the children, the families all together.
Thanks, Unia. So yeah, obviously we face and our students face a multitude of issues related to the climate. So we want to talk a little bit about how we approach these issues and how we build resilience among our students. So at Peas, we believe in a whole school approach, and that really is underpinned by a belief that we need to empower adolescents to be climate leaders. So we often think that education can really be used as a powerful tool to build this resilience and to make sure that we are solutionizing these climate issues that all our students face. And adolescence can really be a critical window to build these skills, to develop that agency and these lifelong behaviors. And especially with girls, we see that girls' education is a lot of studies point to how effective educating girls can be in mitigating these climate issues, but it's often overlooked as well as a climate resilience tool. So at Peas, we really support girls to make sure that they access the information that they need and the education that they need, and to participate and adopt leadership positions, which really positions them as very powerful climate actors. And we find that when young people develop these practical skills to adapt, that has, as we've mentioned before, a kind of spillover effect, which helps and protects households by building these kind of climate smart livelihoods, and also helps them respond to local risks associated. So we're going to go through what we do within classrooms and outside of classrooms, and kind of how we adapt our whole school approach to really make sure that young students and young people at our schools are being given the adequate tools to deal with all the issues that Unia laid out there. So I'm going to hand back over to Unia, who can take us through what we do inside the classroom.
Thank you, Ale. So at Peace, we implement the national curricula both in Zambia and Uganda, where climate is embedded as a cross-cutting theme across subjects. So there has been that realization that climate change is real and everyone has to wake up right from the schools. So there's a cross-cutting theme across the subjects in our national curricula. But also at Peace, we have what we call our famous Peace Top 10 teaching approach, which helps students to develop their critical thinking skills to respond to climate changes. So it's a wide kind of pedagogy that we cannot go through today, but it has an aspect of where the children are helped to think, to solve problems on their own about the issues around them. So we invest a lot in teacher training, meaning that staff feel confident in delivering this content. And the teachers also have to be abreast with the issues of climate change and how to best support the students, because in a way they are also affected, whether the children are present but not ready to learn, or the children are absent most of the time. It also affects the teacher and the work he does. Ale?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. So we have designed programs that run not just in the classroom, but beyond the classroom. We have quite a number of life skills programs. We have school clubs and communities where such structured curricular opportunities like the green life skills are passed on to the students. So our life skills program builds finance, entrepreneurship, and decision-making skills. And so students report significant improvements in communication, decision-making, and teamwork. When our students get together in the clubs, there is a lot that they learn together. There is a lot of peer learning from each other, sharing of scenarios from each other, and also issues of problem solving. They all get together and try to advise each other and have these problems solved together. But these are clubs where they also get extra skills over and above what they have learned in the classrooms. So there are extra skills that are imparted to the children outside school, and these skills are transferable. They are skills that they can use back at home to improve the livelihoods, to improve the ways their parents practice their farming, so that they improve their family livelihoods, but also create themselves a bigger chance of being sustained in the schools to study and finish the cycle or complete the cycle. So in the schools, we also have a dedicated girls approach. And as mentioned before, climate-related issues disproportionately affect the women or the girls in our case. And we have adolescent girls because these are secondary schools. But we have in our schools created a position of the senior woman teacher who oversees the girls' welfare and coordinates targeted support. So you'll find the senior woman teacher will try to create private centers where the girls can go for them to have a bit of their menstrual hygiene practice. So those private places are created by and communicated to the girls by the senior woman teacher. The senior woman teacher will be a great advocate for clean water and presence of water in the schools, because she has to front the case of the girls and how the lack of the water in the school can affect their education. The senior woman teacher, you'll also find, does a lot of psychosocial and emotional support to the girls. Time and again, they sit together with her, they share with her what they are going through back at home in the schools, and she's right there to support them and help them to navigate through the challenges. These challenges are inevitable, they will always come up, but how do we help them to navigate through the challenges? So 50% of the student leadership positions in our schools are reserved for girls, ensuring that they are active participants in climate. Because for any address that anyone makes, it's important that she speaks something about climate change, how it affects their education, and how they can build resilience in order to have the education continue. So the girls' clubs provide designated spaces for students to meet and advocate for each other. So this is where they share challenges, they listen to each other, advise each other, co-create solutions as students, but also in the support of their teachers and the senior woman teacher.
Thanks, Unia. So obviously we've looked what we do within the schools with our students, but it goes without saying that infrastructure is the kind of foundational bench where we build our whole school approach on. And as we've seen, like the physical foundations of schools can be affected by climate change. So I think it would be really important to talk about a bit how we build our schools and the kind of infrastructure that we use. So we use carbon smart construction. So we try to make sure that schools are built with natural ventilation and that these schools are built with and that these schools are built with. Can everyone still see the screen? Sorry, it's just gone off.
Yep. Yeah, we can.
Sorry. And that these schools are built with earth bricks, so local materials that ensure sustainability as well. And we also want to make sure that power is as uninterrupted as possible. So we utilize solar power a lot in most of our schools, so that even when the power does cut out, as we saw in Zambia a lot in 2024, even though the situation has gotten better, students aren't left without power for long periods of time. And that means that learning is as interrupted as possible. Obviously, borehole failure is a concern as well, especially for hygiene-related issues. So we make sure that we harvest rainwater so that water access is as uninterrupted as possible as well. And then finally, we really believe that our schools should serve the local communities and that they're built as part of the community as well. So we want to make sure that our schools can act as local hubs during climate shocks as well. And I think a nice example from Zambia at one of our schools called Peace Campinda, students there helped grow and produce 180 bags of maize, which was enough to feed students and staff for an entire year. So you can see that then food insecurity is also alleviated through using the school as a kind of local hub. So yeah, let me just go back on. My computer has, unfortunately for me, stopped sharing the thing. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So yeah, that's kind of how we integrate our whole school approach, and we really we want to make sure that the kind of main takeaways from this is that that proactivity is really key when we're talking about climate change. It's really important that we're proactively preparing our students for this new climate reality, unfortunately. And we believe that wherever is possible, climate education should really cross-cut a student's education, should really be integrated in multiple facets of the student's life at school, either in their classroom lessons or in their after-school clubs, or in just building up their confidence. So by giving students these skills, these interpersonal skills, skills in which they can advocate for themselves, even just building their confidence in general. While it may not be directly linked to a climate-specific education, you're still giving them the tools in the future to advocate on behalf of themselves, to have that confidence and that ability to really make sure that they understand and are resilient to this kind of uncertain climate future. And we really think that the approach should deploy the entire school. It should build an entire school environment that really supports and uplifts each student and the local community, and that it's done with empathy as well, that we're really attuned to the issues that students are facing. Because in many ways, as Ania mentioned, these are very extreme issues that is kind of, can also be quite traumatic as well a lot of the time. So how are we making sure that we're supporting our students and that the entire school is doing it collaboratively as well, I think is really important. And it's meant to show that the effectiveness and importance of making sure that this effort is collective, that it's not on individuals to try and mitigate their own circumstances, but we band together as communities, and that we really try and mitigate these issues in the future. So yeah, I think that's kind of our approach. But there are, of course, things that we want to improve, and as an organization, we're still trying to adapt and change our approach as well when necessary. And I think we have some areas of improvement that would be good to share with the wider group. But I think one of them is this consistent implementation of effective, and effective really being the key word there, co-curricular programs across our schools and student bodies. So how are we making sure that this is applied consistently, that all students have consistent access to these spaces, to these opportunities? I think is something that is really important to us. And that is especially true when we go to scale as well. As we mentioned, a lot of these learnings are from our network schools where we have obviously a lot of control. But when it goes into partner schools, when we're working more with government schools and everything, we see that the consistency of application, whether it be teacher trainings or the student experience, can sometimes be a little bit inconsistent as well. So how are we continuing that kind of standards approach? Obviously, always amplifying our student voices to advocate for and represent their country's climate reality. I think it's really important. whilst we are building these skills with our students, and we are building this confidence and everything, what can we do as an organization, even just maybe at the higher level, at the global level? How are we advocating on behalf of our students? How are we making sure that their views are properly represented, either in spaces like this, or in other contexts, to make sure that people are really understanding just how destructive climate change is being in our countries of operation. Unfortunately, yeah, with Uganda and Zambia, as we've seen, as Unia laid out, these are really serious effects, and they are consistently labeled as some of the most at-risk countries to climate change. And it's really important that we shift the responsibility from those countries also onto what we can do in our own spaces as well. And then the final thing is expanding our climate partnerships. I should have mentioned before, obviously we heard from Earth Warriors last week, but we have collaborated with Earth Warriors in our primary schools in Zambia in Eastern Province, and that's been really effective. So grade 1 to 3 students receive the Earth Warriors climate education, and we've seen that be really effective. And that sets a really good foundation to then into secondary school. Where do we build upon those understandings, and then we impart those sort of skills, and that we see it as a continued education rather than not just something that you cover in primary or secondary, but throughout your education life. So we're always open to see more climate partnerships, how to better improve our programming, and maybe have more climate specific education in general. So on that note, if here are our contact details, I'm sure we'll share them around. But yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch and have a conversation, we're always open to it. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Thanks to Unia for that. And yeah, I'll hand back over to Ajay now.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, Unia. That's really, really helpful. I think both from what the challenge is, the scale of the challenge, from what's happening in the school, and then resilience at the systems level, which we'll hear much more from Harold as well shortly. But happy to respond to or bring in some questions at this point. Anything which connects with your environment, which you would like to ask. Yes, Suman.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's really lovely to see Peace organizations, network of schools, and the wonderful work that you're doing. And I like your kind of systematic approach to tackling the climate crisis by building students' capabilities and then some of the school level systems as well. Throughout your presentation, I saw some lovely photos of people from the schools that seemed like were planting trees and kind of engaged directly with environmental action. And so my question is, do you have specific environmental programs of that kind where like specific tree planting or like environmental clubs or programs that are a bit more direct in that way? And if so, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I can start. Thanks for that question. Really good question, actually. So yeah, we do have a lot of our clubs do restoration projects as well sometimes. So from the Peas Campinda example that I gave during the presentation, students can be actively engaged with the local environment, with agriculture and everything to build up the school's resilience in general. And then also in our agricultural, we offer agriculture as a kind of core subject as well at a lot of our schools, because as Unia mentioned, a lot of these students come from farming communities. So we build up those skills, and through that that subject, not just in the national curriculum, but also at Peas, we teach sustainable farming practices as well. And it's really important that these students get obviously hands-on experience with what they're actually learning, that it's not just in the classroom, but also out in the field as well. I don't know, Unia, if you want to mention anything else from a Uganda context.
Thank you so much, Ali. Besides what we have done internally, but we have also partnered with other organizations that whose work is into climate change interventions, and those have come to our schools. We are now working like partners. They have what we call nursery beds. So we shall have a day, a community day for a school where, say, like 500 young seedlings are brought to the school. a percentage of them stays at the school, they are planted within the school, and others, our students will carry and go into the communities, requesting all those that have land plots within that community for them to plant a tree or two in their homesteads or in their gardens. Yeah.
Thank you. Vanda?
Yes, hi, thanks very much. My name is Wanda Bedard. I'm the president founder of a Montreal, Canada-based foundation called 60 Million Girls. So we support South. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. One of the things we've definitely been seeing, as you've mentioned very clearly, is the huge impact of climate change, especially for girls' education. Children are being pulled out of school because of food insecurity, because of, in case it's of interest to anyone, our organization has been working for the past 2 years to create an offline climate change video game, specifically targeting children in the global South. So it's a pretty big process. We're a completely volunteer-run organization, and we have 3 professional game designers working for us, also on a volunteer basis. In our projects, we use a lot of solar power, provide servers, Rachel, in case anyone is familiar with that, where you can download a lot of content offline so that it's very easy to on there. We have a community of about 700,000 students that we can reach with that. My comment or question is if there's any interest by any other organizations to work on this with us. We're also actively looking for either coders or programmers, particularly in the global South, who might be interested to work on this project with us. So thank you very much. This is a really great forum, and I appreciate what we're learning today.
Thank you, Vanda. Thank you so much for the offering, and thank you for also joining us such early in the day for you. So thank you very much for doing that. And certainly, it would be lovely to connect separately as well to learn more and maybe bring it to the community as well, something more of your learnings.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And a lot of comments are coming in and appreciation is coming in on the chat as well. So please do read, Zandra Unia. And just one question from me as well before we then move it on. I'm curious, what kind of challenges do surface in the clubs when children meet? So when the girls are meeting them, like what kind of challenges are surfacing?
Unia, do you want to take that one?
So some of the challenges that the girls bring up in their clubs, this is a time when they share, especially with their senior woman teacher. This is somebody who is in charge of really looking after the girls and advocating for what they need that can help them to stay in school. This is when they share the challenges that they may have. If these are resident students, they'll share the challenges they have in the dormitory or in their residence. What is it that the school can work on to make their life better? What are the unseen challenges, the challenges that someone has not paid attention to yet? Maybe there is a water supply, but it's inadequate. And so they have to make those long lines, and they badly need the water. There's no way they can go to school without or to class without having a bath. And so they find themselves getting to class late because of limited, say, water points. So it is something that the senior woman teacher will then go to advocate for, present to the school administration. Partly that is one of the issues. And then some of the issues are coming from home. And sometimes the girls are facing some hardships at home that may even prevent them from coming to school in the coming days, or even completing the cycle. So they raise these issues, and the senior woman teacher is there to catch up with these issues, because now already these are girls at risk, and that is a very big, important category or cohort that she needs to take care of. Sometimes the issues even call for the teacher visiting the home of this girl and speaking to the parents. Probably there are discussions at home of the girl, say, completing this term, and the following term they say there's no money, you're being married off, or you will stay at home, or I now have to go and work, so you'll be the one to look after your siblings. So before this comes up, the girl has a chance to share it at school, and if there is a way she can be supported, whether through the head teacher or this senior woman teacher visiting the home and speaking to the children, speaking to the parents, that really does them really well. Yes.
That's so phenomenal. Thank you. I think it seems they're very acute and urgent problems in their life, which they get a space to share, and thereby it comes to the school as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. Handing it over to Harold. Harold, thank you very much for joining us again. And we're really looking forward to enter into the context of Malawi.
Thanks so much, AJ, and hi, greetings to everyone. Welcome to the home heart of Africa, Malawi. Can you confirm if you can see my slides? Okay, great, thank you. So our context is much similar to what Unia and Alessandro were just sharing in terms of the effects. So I will not dwell much on the effects. I'll probably move to our context and what we have done, but the background is much similar and almost the same. So our program was under Climate Just Communities. It's Climate Just Communities, funded by the Scottish Government, 2024 up to March this year. And there's a bridging phase, which is coming up from April 2026 to March 2027. So under this Climate Just Communities program, linked community development, we're looking at strengthening education systems with specific focus on resilient schools, supporting schools' resilience towards climate shocks. So just as a background, linked community development Malawi is in a partner of organizations. Under Link, we are operating under Link. So we are operating in Malawi, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Rwanda. And we have got a partner office in Scotland, Link Education International. So what we have been doing, mainly we have looked at having or treating the issue of climate change as through a human rights-based approach. So really promoting just being people-centered, okay? Applying human rights-based approach as a principle in managing climate change and people understanding climate change, really looking at issues around equity and justice. I'll share you more on a program we have implemented in Neno district. So I'm highlighting on the map where Neno is in Malawi. The key emphasis of Neno here at the bottom is this is one of the areas which has been hit hard by cyclones in Malawi between 2022 and 2023. During that period, from around 2021, we have been having several cyclones coming from the Indian Ocean through Mozambique into the southern part of Malawi. But 2022 and 2023 saw heavy devastation of 3 cyclones, particularly Cyclone Gombe, Tropical Storm Anna, and the Cyclone Freddy. So the southern part of Malawi was heavily devastated. So we had a program running in Neno, and that moved us to really look into integrating climate change. So the goal was to ensure that schools are supported to withstand effects of climate change, but also to recover from climate-related shocks, particularly with a focus on continuity of learning. So uninterrupted learning the issue of really preparing, planning, preparing, and responding. So we really wanted to ground on those principles. So in terms of our take on education, we focused on just walking you through why education is central. We looked at the issues around climate impact, how disasters really affect schools, and the water points, wash facilities. We faced that between 2022 and 2023. And then education playing a dual role, both in terms of itself being affected, but also being a vital tool on building resilience and adaptability. So education is affected, but it also builds the long-term resilience that we need. And then we looked at whole issue around community support. Most of our traditions applying a whole community approach. When disasters strike, schools serve as evacuation centers for people displaced, but also schools serve as maybe distribution points for any relief items. So there is also that part, even if a school would not be affected itself, but because the surrounding community is affected, the school gets affected. Even the whole issues around learners attending, it spans from just a school itself, but to the whole community. So we really wanted to look at learning and schools being long-term strategy for managing systemic change or infusing systemic transformation in managing climate change. If we teach learners whilst young, they will live with the notion of protecting the environment. But schools are also most respected hubs within communities which can serve as the centers for collective action against climate change. We mainly are looking at education as safeguarding the future. If we educate the community, the young population, children, learners, we will safeguard the future. And in our case, we are looking at building climate resilient education, particularly in Malawi. So we were building coming from the point of the resilient imperative, looking at the national development systems that cannot withstand climate shocks if applied on their own, to looking at being central and pivotal standard operating procedures that can build strong systems and anchor planning, resilience, as well as responding. Schools as providing essential services, all right, education systems should prioritize and protect communities or health systems to hold the systems around building and dedicating emergency budgets. So I'll come back to some of these points. It's just kind of an overall approach. Schools as being environments or coming from environments where they need to protect learners and millions of learners, all right? All the way to looking into schools, building that notion into the curriculum and embedding that climate adaptation and disaster risk management directly into the school systems. So we were really looking at schools as building a safer future, coming from just being affected to really building stronger policy strategic direction. We grounded our interventions in three climate just pillars. So in the three pillars of climate justice, procedural justice, which looks at really planning processes that involve everyone, leaving no one behind in planning, be it people at the margins, in whatever marginalities we can define, to even those people who sit in the boardrooms. So involving everyone in between, local communities, local authorities, to the second pillar around distributive justice, which is really inclusion of the most affected people and populations. And the third one being the transformative justice, which is really looking at the decisions making, creating long-term change, systemic transformations, institutionalizations, being grounded into long-lasting resilience building. So these are the three pillars that we built our programming on. From these 3 pillars, we came up with 5 key building blocks, which we were now going to directly implement. So these 5 blocks would see us deliver on the 3 climate justice pillars. So we called it the 5-point resilient schools guideline, which we were implementing between 2023 and 2026. We will now be extending it to 2027. So the first one is really around orientation. So first, building on the procedural justice involving everyone, ensuring that everyone is participating. So we had to undertake community sensitizations, so moving beyond the school to the whole surrounding community. The second one, participation, not just involvement, but active participation. Under this one, we applied principles like the participatory vulnerability analysis, which is a long-term stage that builds learning from the communities themselves. So as a project, we go in with just the tools, the PVA, participatory vulnerability analysis itself, but communities come up with the results themselves. So that's one thing we liked, the PVA analysis, and applied it in communities and community level. One of the key results they come up with is a hazard map. So I'll show you at the end what a hazard map looks like. So the hazard map informs them in now to the 3rd stage, which is around planning. So they have to plan. So in terms of schools now build climate resilience in their primary school improvement plans. These plans are funded by government through the school improvement grant. So when you build climate resilience within the school improvement plan, it sees its way through financing in the government system. The participatory risk analysis, stepping back to point number 2, also had other issues because climate resilience is spanning beyond education. So we went into participatory scenario planning with communities, anticipating what the scenarios would be if a certain disaster strike and what their response would be. In agriculture, they went on to look at even weather mapping and weather assessments and how that affects their livelihoods and agricultural services through the PICSA model. So all those came into plans. So there would be farming plans through lead farmers and their sub-farmers, or there would be committees, assessment and recovery committees developing their plans. But here, under number 3, I mainly highlighted the school improvement plan because we are looking at focusing on the education side. So within their school improvement plans, they would do all sorts of other activities, school improvement planning, or resilient schools planning at the school level, wash activities at the school level or community level, recoveries, loss and damage. So we supported communities under these various themes. The 4th aspect we looked at is around learners themselves and learners' participation. So we worked at disaster risk management clubs. So establishing the clubs, letting learners participate in those clubs, having a patron and a matron they can talk to on anything that they are facing, and then resourcing that club. So providing resource materials. These are kind of evacuation support materials, whistles, reflector jackets, boots, things like that. But then also financing the disaster risk management club activities. When they meet, they would plan what they would want to do. Either they want to plant trees. So if those that wanted to plant trees surrounding their school environment, we would provide the support for them to plant trees. So that would mean tree seedlings of their choice, depending on their PVA results, wheelbarrows, drums, things like that, so that they can undertake their club activities. So they would range depending on the needs from their school environment. Others would just be a gully filling. If the gully is forming, they would do probably baskets to just fill gullies around their communities and things like that. And then we moved on into emergency response, so ensuring that everyone else understands what to do in cases of emergencies. So emergency drills, having an assembly point, how do you move to the assembly point, how do you manage yourself, so things like that. And then the weather stations, so trying to understand also or predicting the weather and looking at the weather issues. So we had to support with weather station and areas. Just to highlight what the achievements have been in that work. The first two columns are what I was discussing, but I'll move to the third one. So we have established DRM clubs in 58 primary schools, just in Neno, and the government is looking at those and scaling them up. We finalized our trainings and the budgetary supports with the government were done. We moved into infrastructure and supported water points. So drilling of new water points. These are drip well drills, refurbishment or maintenance of boreholes, depending on what the community would need in their area. One key aspect is when under loss and damage, when we just completed a roof, there were 11 learners who reported the next day at school, having cited that they were feeling unsafe. So immediately, 11 learners reported that they had missed school because they were feeling unsafe, and now that the roof was recovered, they immediately came back to school. We pushed for strategic recommendations, looking into policy and planning, requesting government to allocate more funding towards integrating resilient schools back into the education systems. That is still work, that's ongoing. We are not yet there, but building and aligning it to ongoing policy framework, but also looking at student-led governance, which is mainly just supporting that planning should be, students should be at the center of the planning, and ensuring that learners can bring the knowledge just from the school back into their homes. So some of the tree seedlings, I was also pleased to hear from colleagues from Uganda, Onia, that what the learners are doing at the school level are encouraged to even take it from there to their homes also. And then we're encouraging the transition to practical skills. So what you are learning in the school should still and encouraged to be used at their home and applying in their home life. In terms of the broadcastings, we went on to do national radio programs and the jingles, because we realized that climate change affects almost everyone across the nation, not just in the area we were working on. So we embarked on a nationwide campaign as well. We would broadcast a radio jingle and ask people to phone in and discuss. So we had 2,239 listener responses. So each of these listener responses would bring you an idea, and that idea would inform the next program on what the knowledge gap is, for example, or what the thematic area is, or what is people's interest. And then you would develop the next program based on what the people are saying or highlighting. So we came in to look at knowledge retention. After that, we realized that there is heavy knowledge retention, at least to those people who were coding. We looked at also attitudes towards climate change. What are people looking at it? And we noted that with the cyclones, it has developed a good momentum around people wanting to manage the climate or understanding what it means to manage their climate environments. So just sharing the key drivers of success that we have looked at is really putting the student learners at the center of programming, let them practice, let them understand what climate change management is all about and what they need to do. That brings a lot of awareness in their PA networks, but also as they return to their homes. Looking at technical skills, focusing on moving beyond training to practical gains that they can make from just not raising tree nurseries, but maybe raising tree nurseries as an income generating activity. You sell part of your tree seedlings within there. Borehole repairs, not just maintaining a borehole, but we went on to do savings and loans group at the borehole, at the water point committee. The money that you are bringing in as a committee for repairing the borehole, how can you turn that into an income generating activity so that then the community is benefiting from not just maintaining the borehole, but also they have got a village bank in terms of the same at the borehole. So things of that sort, looking at leveraging on the gains that can be done. But also the community to school linkage, school education systems not being in isolation, but being treated as part of an ecosystem within the school setting. Policy mainstreaming, then being driven by policy involvement in the education sector and what the education sector would like to see. So we came up with a resilient schools pack that was a mainstreaming of policy involvement, technical skills, gender and equity, as well as resource box. So bringing policy and practice into really ensuring that schools are implementing. So not having the policy on one hand developed on paper, but how can schools be key implementers of the policy systems that are there? And then the disaster risk management integration. So ranging from both schools planning for disaster risks to clubs implementing it, all the way to the communities and financing it. So we believe these 5 really supported the program to move ahead. And these 5 have enabled us to see some systemic change. We are already seeing that plans are no longer standalone documents. They are being functional and being incorporated now and being financed through the ongoing school systems, like school improvement plans. And then improved learning. I highlighted how we were just really excited to see an immediate jump of 11 learners immediately reporting feeling safe now at school and immediately getting back into school from on the verge of dropping out. And then the whole resilient support, shifting the mindset, learners taking into their homes what they are learning from school, practicing from school. And then proving resilience around the whole community approach in terms of not just looking at schools education, but looking at access to facilities like wash and maintaining really an all year round wash system. I talked about area perspective and a bit analysis, PVA, that leads into a PVA analysis and a hazard map. This is an example of one village that produced their hazard map. It's in the local language, Chichewa, but what they are highlighting here is this is a map for Group Village Headman in Wenyama, showing the hazards and needs for our school. All right. So they are showing their village boundary, they are showing where their river is, where the railway is, and then all sorts of things. And here towards the bottom, they are showing this is the heavy winds. And these are diseases that affect the animals, diseases like cholera and so on. So they are mapping all that and saying where there is a railway, there are risks or hazards associated with accidents along the railway. Where the load and the railway are crossing, we need to manage that side and see how our learners crossing the railway. So it's managing all those hazards within the area. And part of the school improvement plan also looks at their disaster risk planning at the school. So again, it's in the local language because we encourage them to put up in things that they can understand. So here they are talking of heavy winds, they're talking of drought, they're talking of flooding or other pandemics that can come in their area. So, and then they are discussing what should they do? What are their actions? And where will they do it? When? What's the resources required? Who is the leader? And what else is required? Who else and what else would be required in there? So they have got their plan and it's costed and their plan on what they need to do. Within part of our sensitization, we highlighted or brought about knowledge to the schools, and we were painting school murals. So this is a painting on a school and just highlighting to them what they need to do, various action points. So here, asking learners to know about their recovery plan, and then have an emergency assembly point, keep your surroundings clean, and the messaging there, what needs to be done. So this mural would translate into something like this when painted at the school level. The exciting thing was that beyond the mural just providing the message about climate change, we also noted that the mural was giving learners a chance to practice reading. So they would come to the mural and would love to just read around it. When communities come to the school environment, either for football games or community meetings, or when they are just passing by, they would all have the message displayed there, readily available to them. So these are just some of the Disaster Risk Management Club members with their trees ready to plant, a resource book produced by the Ministry of Education, which guides their disaster risk management at school level. We provided supplies to the schools. An example of a project we worked on loss and damage. So after cyclones hit, the whole roof was blown, the whole electric wiring was gone. We were replacing it. This is a teacher's house at one of the schools, and really one of the works that we were doing under loss and damage. For the whole community approach, we were supporting community livelihood as well. So beyond just recovery, looking at how do you strengthen communities with income generating activities, doing beekeeping and the livelihoods around manure making for increased harvest in the agricultural fields. So all this part of the climate change and working with the communities. So yeah, thanks so much, everyone. We would be glad to really work with anyone. For more details, these are my contact details. You can just reach out. We'll be glad to do more partnerships, strengthen this work, but also more engagement and more sharing and more learning from others and like-minded. So yeah, thank you so much, and over to you, AJ.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you so much. I think this has been so phenomenal. I think a whole community approach, and a whole, not even a community approach, it's beyond the community, working with the government, and a very thoughtful approach which is layered into step by step, but then it's integrating the curriculum as well, it's integrating the club's approach as well, and then it's integrating. So fascinating. I'm sure there are many questions. Chiara has one. Maybe Chiara, you want to begin with it, and then we can continue with those questions.
Sure. Yes, I had a question in both presentations, in Peas and Link. You spoke about the community approaches and how you can engage the community around improving the resilience to be better prepared and yeah, more resilient in the face of the climate disruption. Whether it's food security or things that improvements that would better absorb flooding water, so it's not pooling, or perhaps approaches that would help deal with heat waves, minimize the impact of that. I just wondered how much knowledge do you feel you already have in these areas of these different adaptations, resilience solutions? It's just quite a vast area, and there are so many organizations working specifically on solutions that improve resilience in all of these different areas, be it soil, be it heat, be it water improvements, etc. So I just was curious, how have you found your own and your organization's knowledge in this area? How much knowledge is available? How much have you partnered with others to kind of talk about and bring expertise of these different resilient solutions? Are you tapping into indigenous knowledge? Are you tapping into sort of other partnerships? And would it be helpful for you to have more of this kind of partnerships with organizations that are pioneering or innovating new solutions, or indeed sometimes just bringing older solutions that we already had, but then sort of were forgotten or sort of stripped out of our communities, bringing them back, the kind of old knowledge of, let's say, like landscape management to retain water when it rains, to prevent droughts, but also to have retention landscaping where the water doesn't run out when it's there, but also doesn't create floods. When it's heavy rains or typhoons. So yeah, that's the kind of general question on partnerships and your kind of knowledge in these spaces and what's needed to push further into that resilience space.
Right. I can start. So I was just also typing in the chat that I think we are welcome to partnerships, and partnerships are good because that will be cross learning with others and depending on the experiences others have also had. As I highlighted, we started this work just a few years ago for us at Link because we faced it in our program that we have been on learning. But I think for us, there have been few things. Our knowledge is always cross-checked with the communities affected through the methodologies I highlighted. That ensures that what we are bringing to the community speaks to their needs, addresses their needs, but also is acceptable to them and builds long-term systemic change. So when we have ideas, we go back to the drawing table and look at their plans and what they developed as their hazard maps or school improvement plans or water point committee plan. So we do cross-check around that. We then move from that stage to integrate it into the government systems. Who is doing what in government and what systems or what approaches? At that point, most governments, the challenge is the delay in reverting back to you because of their bureaucracies, but systems that are driven by communities and are authenticated at the community level, village planning level, village development committee, those ones are believed to be sustainable and long-term. So yeah, we would welcome. We are doing a blend of indigenous knowledge as well as theories or experiences from elsewhere. And we have, I think, some 3 or 4 activities that have really worked well when the indigenous knowledge is fused with the modern theories or experiences, particularly things around yield, learner participation, and learner safety. I think they have been great. Yeah, so we are open to learning as well.
Thank you. Alessandro?
Yeah, thank you for that, Harold. That was really, really interesting. I particularly liked the kind of 3 pillars of justice that underpin the approach. I think that's actually really important and something that we could look to take forward as well. My question was on school improvement plan integration, and I was just wondering did you have any challenges with that integration, having a kind of climate element within the school improvement plans? I think we find a lot of the time, sometimes school leaders are really stretched quite thin when it comes to these kind of add-ons sometimes, or like integrations, and that they can sometimes fall to the wayside. But it seems that you guys had a lot of success and a lot of uptake and everything. I was wondering if that was as a result of maybe something specific that you guys did. Was that a long process, or did you find that the kind of inclination to include it was actually relatively easy and everything? Because yeah, I'm sure other organizations have. We obviously use school improvement plans, and we've got some digitized versions as well to try and create ease. But sometimes there's a little bit of an issue with, uptake and inconsistent application and that type of thing. So yeah, if you could speak to that'd be great.
Yeah, I think there were a few issues. The first part is that we started off with awareness, integration within the school committees, communities surrounding, and so on. So once they understood it, it was easier to start now going into the school improvement plan committees and integrating it in there. Some of the key things we noted was around alignment of the school improvement planning cycle to the project. So there is a time frame there. School improvement plans are done annually around the time the schools or government is budgeting. But that's not necessarily the time the projects are at a PVA analysis and planning, but maybe you have moved to the next phase. And so once you miss that planning, it's hard for them to come back and insert climate justice elements. The second thing is just really that point around prioritization of needs. So managing or doing climate change investments, people look at it as long-term or sometimes unlikely to happen. And then they would prioritize a need when someone needs an immediate need at that point. And you find that's where almost all the resources are going. So there is a scramble for resources, same small budget around whether you do climate change or whether you do the most immediate needs at the school level. Yeah, I would share those were the critical ones. So it's really balancing the school needs, but again, going back to who should drive the agenda at that school level. If you are grounded within, particularly within the transformative justice pillar, if the communities grasp that pillar, they would understand the long-term needs of the school and how managing the long-term needs actually reserves their resources in future and realize a sufficient allocation of resources in future. So it's around really building on that understanding around the three pillars of justice and why you would need to manage them even in the long term.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. I think this was really fabulous. Harold, I know that there's a lot of interest also in resources as well, and same for Alessandro and Unia. If there are resources which you can share, even about how you're even planning with the system, how you're even planning with the guidelines. I know the presentation shares, but if there's a kind of a tool or a kind of a survey which you're using, sometimes these simple things can be really helpful. And for Alessandro, if there's this, the training model you were sharing around it, or even if somebody wants to set up a club, and I know both of you spoke about clubs, but they both were very different. One was about building agency, one was about, disaster management. So what would those club setting look like if somebody has to start in their own context? I will share your email addresses as well. But thank you so much. This was really, really valuable. And we really look forward to continuing our engagement with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentations and all the work you're doing, more importantly, on this.
Thank you so much, Chiara. Thank you.
Question.
Okay.
And I know there are a lot of people interested in the recordings. We keep getting messages for people who can't make the sessions, but really want to see the recording.
So there are many, many people who are listening to these recordings. We know that we are getting separate emails for that. So we'll continue summarizing takeaways and highlights as well. But if you have ideas on how we can take this forward as well, because we want to go into more of the details as well. But I think this is a great segue. We've talked about curriculum integration, and now this is the first time, I think, Chiara, we've really got into system integration, and we've got into resilience. And I think how we can move ahead from that is something which we would really be keen to explore. So thank you. Hope you have a lovely day ahead and week ahead. Wishing you all the best.
Thanks, everyone.
All the
Thank
best.
you so much.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you.